Have you ever asked yourself, was my childhood really good? Am I simply only remembering the good times and ignoring the ever-present dread of my past? Were the things I enjoyed really that good to begin with? Maybe I was simply too young and foolish. Maybe they had glaring issues that I have just been ignoring all these years. Maybe things just weren't that good way back when. AI seems to be all the rage recently, from the infinite horde of AI-generated images online to Elon Musk building fully autonomous taxis and robot butlers. People can't seem to shut up about the growing power of robots. The future is now, thanks to science people, and I am fully prepared to welcome in this age of the machine.
Why should we help save humanity when we are no longer human?
The premise of your question is flawed. You were never human, but you were heroes.
In truth, the moral, philosophical, economic, and technological implications of truly functional artificial intelligence are likely beyond my capacity. What is not beyond my capacity, however, is products made for children. Which is why all this robot talk has me thinking about the 2005 classic, Robots. I was about 7 years old when this movie first came out, so maybe that alone is why I remember it so fondly. And yes, I do in fact own a copy on Video Home System cassette tape.
Nostalgia is truly one of the great human weaknesses, second only to the neck.
That said, nostalgia alone is not the only thing this movie has going for it. For starters, the casting is absolutely stacked. Featuring the likes of Ewan McGregor during the height of the Star Wars prequels, Halle Berry, Robin Williams, Mel Brooks, Greg Kinnear, Amanda Bynes, Drew Carey, Jennifer Coolidge, Harlan Williams, Paul Giamatti, and Stanley Tucci. It even features bit appearances from Jay Leno, Randy Jackson, Paula Abdul, Al Roker, and James Earl Jones. That's a lot of celebrities.
No, that's a lot of celebrities.
The animation work, while dated by today's standards, is absolutely incredible for 2005. I've always loved the way everything looked in this movie. I really like how the individual plates of metal seem to fit together on some of the robots, like Big Weld and Ratchet. All the whirligigs and doodads moving and bumping and meshing together, it's just incredibly pleasing to me. Even now, as an adult, I'm a sucker for those videos of a ball moving down a track and then bouncing off things. Yeah, I mean, most are probably just AI generated for toddlers, but hey, they capture me. All of this is on top of a script that tells a simple but fun story while having plenty of enjoyable screwball comedy and the types of jokes that hit both kids and adults. Some of those jokes might not be the most culturally relevant anymore, but it's still a really fun time. It's even got those jokes that only the adults in the room were going to get.
But it's okay. Making the baby's the fun part.
I'm not really going to go into the plot too much in this video, but one thing I will mention is that I think this is the movie that made me realize, even as a child, that most evil businessmen in movies just aren't really good at business. Ratchet's whole plan revolves around discontinuing spare parts for the poor robots so that they'll invest in more profitable upgrades. But the robots can't afford those upgrades, so you went from getting some business to no business. I mean, that makes sense, I'm sure.
Anything can be bought and sold for the right oil.
Of course, that's all just a ruse for his real plan of genociding the poor robots, because annihilating your customer base is definitely good business sense. They even try and explain that so Madame Gasket has a supply of metal for her chop shop, but that seems to not make any sense. This city has no shortage of random scrap metal laying about. I don't know why rust-based genocide is a good idea.
Between you and the Namekian, I think I've lost my touch at genocide.
All this is besides the point, as it's not the actual movie that I want to discuss with you today. What I want to discuss is my fear that the things I enjoyed as a child are actually pretty terrible. What I want to discuss is the game.
Should I just preemptively break my own neck to, like, avoid doing this?
I mean, you should.
See ya!
You see, I have this problem. Since I was a video game loving child, right around the time this movie came out, I was the prime demographic for the video game tie-in. I remember actually getting this game on Christmas, probably the year it came out. And I distinctly remember loving it, which is precisely the problem. During this era, any kids movie worth its salt figured out how to pump out a video game to squeeze just a little bit more money out of the kids. Most ended up at the bottom of the bargain bins after only a short time on the market. Now, I've been into retro game collecting ever since I was a teenager. I've seen countless games just like this one going for practically nothing, everywhere from garage sales to Goodwill to retro game stores. Do you see my problem? If movie tie-in games are almost universally considered low-effort slop, what does it say about me and the fact that I love this game? Was I just a stupid kid, easily taken in by the bright lights and colorful music? Just happy to be able to enjoy the mere act of playing a video game? No. No, of course I had to have been smarter than that, right? It's questions like that, questions just like that have allowed Robots the Game to sit on my shelf for the better part of 20 years. What if the game is terrible? What then? Today, I am putting my fond memories of this game on the line to finally put that particular demon to rest.
I'm not saying he's possessed by a demon. I'm not saying he's not possessed by a demon.
The very first thing I noticed was Sierra. I didn't know this going in, but the same company that made King's Quest, Space Quest, and Leisure Suit Larry apparently got really into movie tie-in games at some point. At least their parent company, Vivendi Games, did.
1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4!
The second thing I noticed is that they actually got Stanley Tucci doing the narration for the game as its character from the movie.
This is my son, Rodney. Rodney Copperbottom.
Most movie tie-in games don't actually get the real actors, but Robots got a surprisingly decent number of them. You got Jennifer Coolidge, Harley Williams, and Stanley Tucci.
If you're going to Robot City, you'll need to fix your Wonderbot. I grabbed its blueprint, so you just need to find the pieces.
The most notable absence is, of course, Robin Williams. They hilariously found a way to make sure Fender remained headless for most of his screen time in-game. That said, they replaced some of the celebrity voice actors with voice actor heavyweights, like Gray Griffin and D. Bradley Baker.
In my book, experience outranks everything.
Robots the Game also follows the basic plot of Robots the Movie. That may not seem like a big achievement, but trust me, it beats the alternative. The game itself is fairly simple in concept. It's ultimately a collect-a-thon. Each level has you tracking down a number of objects that will let you move on in some way, shape, or form. It's usually either money or blueprint pieces. Money lets you pay for goods and services.
Hi there. Our next train is the Robot City Express. Tickets cost 10 gold scrap. Would you like one? Enjoy your trip!
And the blueprints let you build a new item to traverse the levels. The blueprint one would make a lot of sense since Rodney here is an inventor in the movie. Usually though, it isn't Rodney who actually builds them, which I felt was an odd flavor decision. It's normally these palette swaps at the hardware store owner from the movie who just give you the item when you beat the stage.
Oh, good work. You've found all the pieces. Well, here's my remote control.
One of the big flaws this game has is what it does with the new hardware and power-ups. You just don't really use them that much in each new stage. There's generally one or two specific new obstacles in each stage that you use your new ability on. You even have a slide ability from the beginning of the game that you almost never use. Running around and normal double jumping is all you need for almost every obstacle. A good collect-a-thon game should reward you for your ability to creatively mix your abilities together. Robots doesn't do that.
We don't do that.
Most of the levels also have a pretty linear design, usually with some way of looping back in on themselves. So you're not even doing that much exploring.
Taxi! Only 5 gold scrap. So, you want a taxi? Thanks! 1 taxi coming up.
Platforming is also kind of weird. It's definitely not bad, but Rodney can have some weird momentum when he's in the air. Add that to the depth being hard to tell in places, and you're gonna fall off a lot. Platforming killed me way more than any enemy. I don't think an enemy even killed me until the last few levels of the game. Still, despite all that, the game actually works pretty well. It's not exactly stellar, but Rodney controls pretty well on the ground, and the environment and enemy designs are really great. All the levels and the enemies feel like they came right out of the movie. I especially love these little top robots. They are a pain in the butt to kill if you try and melee attack them, but if you told me they were just reused designs from my background shot in the movie, I'd believe you in a heartbeat. The music is also pretty great, as it generally captures the whimsical vibe of the world of robots. It is exactly the type of music you expect to accompany wacky, seemingly impractical inventions. I should also talk about combat. It's nothing incredible, but like most of the game, it's overall pretty solid. Rodney has 2 main ways of attacking. When you start the game, you just have a basic melee attack. Look at this wrench! In the movie, Rodney just used basic nondescript wrenches, but this one looks like it was actually made for combat. No wonder it can bludgeon giant missile-shooting robots to death. In the first level, Rodney's dad gives him his second combat ability, the scrap launcher. Oh yeah, Dad, thanks for giving your kid a gun. Time to go to the big city. You know, that might have come in handy in the movie. Ratchet tries to have Big Weld melted down, so Rodney just pulls out a 1911. The scrap launcher, believe it or not, fires scrap, which you can also use at these TV stations to buy stuff. So, it's not just a gun, it's a money gun. Between these 2 forms of attacking, defeating enemies is usually pretty easy. Especially once you invest in the scrap maximum upgrades. Once I had 1,000 scrap in the tank, I just mashed the fire button like I was playing a game of Galaga. Between beating up enemies and collecting the money and blueprint pieces, you have now seen most of the game. There's not really much else of note except the dang vehicle levels. They are probably the worst part of the game. There are a few segments where you have to race around controlling this transport pod. This was a great scene in the movie because you're watching this giant chaotic marble run, but in the game it's just a pain. The transport pod actually controls pretty well, but almost all these segments take place on the main roadway from the movie, and you take damage when you bump into other transport pods, which there are a lot of. Luckily, few of these are necessary to actually beat the game, but the ones that were definitely got some deaths out of me. Oh yeah, bosses. I gotta mention bosses because games have bosses. There are only 3 of them. I'm the boss. I'm the boss. The first one came so late into the game, I had actually concluded that bosses just weren't gonna be a thing. And the first one's actually pretty hilarious. The context is that this is supposed to be the scene where Rodney gets into Ratchet's board meeting for the first time, trying to find his hero Big Weld. In the movie, he just gets tossed out by security, but in the game, there's a boss fight against the board of directors. Which is also hilarious because the board was kind of on Big Weld's side in the movie, but who cares? It's funny. The battle itself is basically whack-a-mole, while the board is spawning in security bots to harass you. Once you hit them each enough times, you win. Rodney does a little dance and then gets thrown out by the security bots. And stay out! The next boss appears in the sewer level, and he might be my favorite. The sewer level was kind of a pain to get through because it's a whole collectathon inside a transport pod, but because there weren't a million things to run into, it was probably the best transport pod level in the game. The boss of this level is this giant guy who shoots these cannons of junk at you. You can respond with your own cannons, but he doesn't stay still for very long, meaning you're always having to lead your shots or, jump around firing cannons until you win. Both were fun. Before I get to the final boss, let me mention a few other fun moments. In the movie, Rodney eventually breaks into Big Weld's mansion to try to find and convince him to help out in their plight. In the movie, this scene had an amazingly detailed dominoes falling sequence, and Big Weld then appears with all this pomp and circumstance, only to then bring Rodney to his lowest by initially refusing to help. In the game, this plays when you beat the Big Weld mansion level.
Big Weld, you've got to come with us and retake control of Big Weld Industries. Ratchet's gone crazy. He stopped making spare parts. He wants to wipe us out modes out.
What? It can't be true. Let's see what Ratchet has to say about this.
That's it. Thanks for responding right away, Big Weld, but I feel like the dramatic tension has been cut a bit.
Just trying to diffuse the tension.
The final couple levels are kind of a slog, to be honest. Between some just unfair enemy placement, the decision to make everything super dark, and a ton of bottomless pits or lava moving through these levels was way harder. I try not to complain about loading screens in old games, but man do you feel them in this game as you have to sit through one after each fall to your death. You don't have to pay a bribe to someone just to get through the last level, as if the painstaking metaphor wasn't more obvious.
Kid, I can't let you in here. Orders, Of course, I've been pretty forgetful lately, so who knows? For 10 gold scrap, I might forget what I'm doing again. What do you say?
Then we get to the final boss, Ratchet and his improved sweepers. I'm gonna be honest, this fight sucks. You do the whole thing with the scrap launcher, so basically it's a shooting gallery. Between this and the whack-a-mole boardroom, I'm starting to sense a certain pattern with their boss design. The devs were nice enough to give you infinite scrap to fire, but between the dark colors of this level and the non-stop horde of enemies the sweepers are dropping on you, it can be hard to feel like you're aiming at anything very well. I just kept mashing the fire button the whole time and hoped I hit something. The first stage of the fight has you shooting the sweepers in their big dumb eyes, which isn't too bad, because at least those are pretty well lit. The second stage is shooting Ratchet as he jumps from sweeper to sweeper and hucks bombs at you. This one was way harder as it's just so much more difficult to differentiate Ratchet from the background, get a good read on his movement patterns, and fend off the bombs and enemy robots. Still, I beat him, and after almost 20 years, I have conquered Robots, the game. So, what's the verdict? Is Robots, the game, a true hidden gem? Or did I completely taint my childhood memories? The answer to both questions is no. I definitely don't think Robots is a bad game. I really enjoyed playing it again after all these years. However, between the occasionally awkward controls, somewhat uninspired boss design, and unlockable skills that just don't really change much, I can't truly call it a great overlooked game. Luckily, it didn't really burn my fond memories of it. Most of the game's problems don't become serious until the later levels, which I didn't get to as a kid. I can't remember fully, but I'm pretty sure I never even got to the first boss of the game back then. Which means that the only levels I played were the best ones. I'll always have those fond memories, and now I can finally lay to bed that nagging feeling that this game I loved sucked. On a personal level, I think this playthrough was an absolute win.
I see this as an absolute win.
Now, I did leave out one great part of this game. It doesn't affect the gameplay at all, so I had to save it until the end. But this is really fun. The extras. Found at those vending machine TVs throughout the game, you can buy these bonus extras for some of your scrap, and they are really fun.
This is my son, Rodney. Rodney Copperbottom.
I don't know if this footage exists anywhere else, but if it isn't, I may currently be one of the only people who has actually bothered to watch this footage of Stanley Tucci and Jennifer Coolidge talking about their roles in the movie and game.
Well, Aunt Fan is this very sort of nurturing motherly character, but what makes her different than most motherly characters is she has this giant behind, like the biggest behind I've ever seen on an animated character.
I think my favorite is Harlan Williams, who plays this big green guy named Lugnut. He's legitimately hilarious. He's got that great dry delivery improv humor.
Hey, thanks, little guy. It was a real decent thing of you to help me out. Here, take this as a reward. A weekend getaway with me in Fiji. Imagine, the two of us sharing a bamboo hut and eating shrimp poppers all day.
I legitimately laughed out loud multiple times watching just the extras. They alone are making me rank this game even higher than I already did. They're just fun. They're just fun.
Daddy's got a flapjack in the frying pan. And most of all, Daddy's gonna throw some corn on the cob right at your forehead. So watch it, kid.
So, with all that said, this has been Robots the Game. A wonderful look into a childhood delight of mine. And I hope you all enjoyed the video. Please give it a subscribe, a like, comment even, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.